Hello and welcome back to Tech TV. Today we're going to be discussing some of the really major systemic attacks that there have been on key companies both in the UK and across Europe. I'm joined as normal by my colleague Pete. Pete, Jaguar Landrover have been hit in a very big way. Tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are on this incident.
Well, I'm on record as saying for ever such a long time now, young as I look, that it's about time we did something about this. Look, this is a nightmare. You've got companies who are actually going to the wall. It's not just Jaguar Land Rover. All of their suppliers are now in a lot of trouble. I wrote a book about this back in 2006. It was called Cyber Alert, and everybody then was going on about this being a Wild West. This isn't a Wild West. This is some sort of mad, anarchic situation where you've got crime gangs just going around shooting the place up, and everybody is suffering as a result. It has to stop. It really has to stop. And then, Bill, as a further factor, we've got this cyber insurance issue, which is just ridiculous.
Well, there have been some notifications that Jaguar didn't have cyber insurance in place and therefore is going to have to meet the entire cost here. It's not that they weren't aware of the need for cyber insurance, but they were in the process of having a new policy in place and they failed to complete the process and therefore they left themselves vulnerable. So obviously there are factors that are both for and against insurance, and every company has its own choice about whether it insures itself, whether it pays ransoms or whatever. But for them to actually intend to have insurance in place and actually through incompetence to fail to be protected, I think is a massive howler. And that brings us on to, well, what are the systemic implications here, not only of a big company like Jaguar, and we'll come on to talk about some of the aerospace incidents as well, but also the systemic impact on all their suppliers? And if this is going to happen more frequently, what's going to be the impact on the insurance industry itself? And I mean, we're already seeing premiums increasing and it being far more conditional. Pete, what are your thoughts on where things are going here?
Well, as you know, Bill, we at Future Intelligence, we've been investigating cyber insurance for well over 3 years now. And the situation is a complete mess. Not only for 3 years as Future Intelligence been looking at it, but during David Cameron's administration, we were asked into the Cabinet Office by Francis Maud to actually talk to them about what we considered the situation to be. And we were there with a lot of the major insurers. And at that time, I pointed out that there was an absolute need for transparency over cyber attacks. We had to know exactly that we should have mandated that people who had suffered a cyber attack should inform the police. And I said that at the time, because how can you expect the cyber insurance industry to come up with a proper policy or with a proper understanding of what the picture is unless they've got the correct figures? It's ridiculous. And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing this situation just getting worse and worse. I mean, you look at these supply chains, right? The supply chains can't get insurance. Norwich Union said about 9 months ago that there were only around 10% of the companies in the UK that have got cyber insurance. So even if Jaguar Land Rover had got cyber insurance, that doesn't mean that the situation instantly remedies itself, because those companies will also be going to the wall too, because the cyber insurance is just for recovery from an incident. That's essentially what it is. So, you know, and we've been trying to promote this to lots and lots of organizations. At the moment, it's deaf ears, but the insurance industry also bears a certain amount of blame in this because it's a moving playing field. So what they're saying is that they're going to insure people if they consider them to have the correct cyber posture. Some people have been talking about putting into companies the equivalent of the black box that you put into a young person's car when they've passed their driving test to make sure that they're not driving badly. We need a real root and branch remedy to all of this, and we do need it fast. But I stress, insurance is not going to be the remedy. Insurance is what occurs after somebody's smashed through your wall.
Yeah, but we do need an accurate and competitive market where we know what the risk is and therefore they can accurately price policies. Otherwise, there's going to be a real problem in the market. And as you say, insurance is never a substitute for cybersecurity. You need both. And one of the things that concerns me is on the disclosure front, which is going to give the entire industry a better picture of what the risks are here. We have the government's cyber security and resilience bill, where they talk about mandating disclosure of incidents, but this has been delayed. It's been rumoured to be coming out at various times this year, and the latest I've heard is obviously in the last reshuffle that's happened very recently, the cybersecurity minister has changed and she's gone to the backbenches, and the bill itself has been delayed to the next parliamentary session, which will be in the spring. And that puts things further back. So for the insurers to have a really accurate picture of the risk here, not only do they need better disclosure so that we know exactly how many incidents are happening, but they need a better idea of what the security position is of the different companies. Now, it's all well and good for large companies where you can do a really detailed cyber audit, because these are expensive exercises to do and you can only really afford to do them for a large company, and that gives you an accurate idea of the posture, and therefore you can price the risk and the policy accurately. But if you're talking about the mass market, it's cost prohibitive to do that sort of detailed cyber audit. And we have various different cyber risk agencies who try and measure risk and price it independently, a bit like your credit risk or whatever in the financial markets. But these are very inaccurate. They don't get access to the inside of a company. They just use bots that trawl the net looking for externally facing endpoints, and they test them for known vulnerabilities to give you a score, which is, it's been compared to sort of assessing fire risk by taking a picture of a building from the opposite side of the street. You don't have any idea whether it's got fire extinguishers or fire doors or anything like that. So it's fairly inaccurate. So we do need a better picture of the risk. We do need a cyber insurance market that's working better. And then maybe the number of people having insurance or carrying it will increase beyond 10%. But if you look at the price of recovery and the cost involved, even if we do have a bigger market, it's still going to mean that the costs are going to drive up premiums and it could be unaffordable.
But look, I mean, it's inevitable that the premiums are going to go up. The sums don't add up, right? Currently, if you go to any cyber security conference, you have the people on the stage saying, we expect 95% of businesses to be here. Well, that's okay. But then you get companies like IBM in its threat report and various other threat reports. Those companies are saying the average cost of a cyber incident now is between 1 and 3 million for a small and medium-sized company. Well, if 95% of companies are going to be hit and those are the costs, then it doesn't add up for the insurance industry. So it's inevitable that the premiums are going to go up because you're going to they'll be expecting to be paid out. I mean, it's not as if you think about car insurance is quite expensive now, but if 95% of the cars on the road were crashing into each other, it'd be a lot more expensive. And this is something that we need to sort out. But I will stress that cyber insurance is not a magic bullet to all of this. Cyber insurance can actually become a bit of a problem because one of the things that ransomware gangs do is when they're actually inside a company, they try to find out whether the company does have an insurance policy, because then they think, oh, right, we can exploit that. We can probably make them pay out. And in fact, I think It's in Australia, and I think a similar policy has been adopted in the UK now, where it's going to be made illegal to pay out to a ransomware attack, which does strike me as actually a very positive move because you have to destroy the market.
Well, you're hitting the point there. Cyber insurance is never a substitute for protection, or you desperately also need a recovery plan. If you need the ability, and you need to rehearse your crisis management plan, and you need to ensure that your backups and everything are in place. So you need to be preventing an incident and having prevention and detection. You also have the need for incident response and the ability to respond, something that's rehearsed. You need the backups, you need to test them, and far too few people test either their incident response plans or their backups, and they find that both are lacking when things happen. So all of that is true, but effectively we have to address this in somehow, whether this is by better international policing and enforcement or better protection and detection. Maybe we need to turn to an expert on the matter, somebody from the industry who is going to be able to shine some light on exactly what the problems are here. I'd like to welcome into the studio Edward Lewis, the Chief Executive Officer of CyXcel. Edward, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, you guys have enormous experience and knowledge in this arena, and you've been hearing a lot of our pontifications here. I wonder what your thoughts are on the market, its preparedness, the status in terms of insurance and other factors, and where we stand and what we need to do.
Right. Well, firstly, thank you for having me on, Bill. Pleasure to be here. Really interesting to listen to you both chatting in the opening there. I've worked in cyber, and in particular in the cyber insurance market, for near enough 18 years at this point. And I have to say that I have a lot of time, a lot of respect for what insurers are trying to do. We're in a period at the moment where the market is soft. The premiums for cyber insurance are incredibly low. There's more capacity than there is demand. If you look at statistics here in the UK, only 10 to 15% of eligible buyers actually choose to buy cyber insurance. So I don't think there's a problem per se with insurance at all, quite the opposite. There's a problem with the message about the value of insurance and trying to encourage organizations actually to buy policies as part of an holistic approach to security and resilience. One of the things that we often see when we talk to slightly larger organizations, so let's be clear, we've got SMBs, small and medium-sized businesses, of which about 97% of all businesses in the UK are comprised. Then you get the corporate mid-market, and then you get the enterprise multinational level, but they're a very small cohort in contrast to the vast majority of businesses that we see in the UK. And I think for most of those businesses, up until this year, the general view has been, look, we get this thing called cyber, it's a problem, but it doesn't feel particularly proximate. It tends to happen to other people rather than to us. As I say, that was previously. This year, that's changed. We've got now very much in the public consciousness on the front line, all of these attacks, not just against big business, but in terms of also how those attacks propagate and cascade down to much smaller entities in supply chain. So I think that should help certainly in terms of getting a better message out about the importance of, firstly, building resilience and security, but secondly, dealing with risk, transferring risk. And if you're looking at transferring risk, then one of the best mechanisms for that is to insurance. So we're living and breathing right now this change in consciousness, this change in approach. I suspect we will see statistics next year suggesting that more people are buying cyber insurance in 2026 than we've seen in the previous 5-10 years as a whole.
Okay, what's the backdrop to all of this, Ed? Well, we've seen this week alone, we've seen two attacks. The Jaguar Landrover one was earlier. However, we've seen two attacks, and the impact of these is beginning to become significant. I mean, we've seen with the Jaguar Landrover one, we're seeing entire supply chains affected. We're being told that a lot of firms in the UK are impacted by this. We're with the the airports attack, what we're seeing is airports have been disabled. The psychological impact on the population at large with all of this is going to be that there's a lot of uncertainty that's been developed. You're going to get people, we've had several, there's incidents that have involved airports, whether they be cyber attacks or fires or whatever.
Yeah.
And we've seen
600% increase in the last 12 months in attacks on the aviation sector. 600%. That's the statistic that that was issued by, I think it was ENISA or the NCA over the weekend.
And so, do you want to go travelling? Do you want to end up stuck in an airport with your kids and all your luggage, wondering when you're going to get back or whether you're going to cancel the airport, the holiday?
Exactly. I mean, look, most of the incidents, though, that we've seen in the context of aviation have been groundside, not airside. So I think it's important that we're balanced and careful with the message that we send. There is no suggestion that the airline flight safety is at risk here. This is really about the disruption and chaos that's caused when a back-end system, an operational system on the ground, often run by a third party rather than the airport or the airline itself, goes down. And what we see when these systems go down is actually the manifestation of something that's happening beyond aviation across all aspects of our lives. Hugely increased dependency on technology. And that's great in the sense that it brings huge efficiencies, it speeds things up, it brings commercial advantages, it helps to bring costs down. But the emphasis hasn't been so much on security as it has on efficiency and commercial gain. And so what we then see is this regression towards processes because we're having to implement manual, human-labored workarounds. We're seeing a regression to how things once were. So we can see the benefits that technology are bringing. We can see sort of the vulnerabilities also at the same time. And I think actually what it does is shine a light on the need for product safety, product security. The regulation around product security in a cyber context has been scant. And that's where really there needs to be a focus and attention. I don't really want to speculate on whether in fact it's safe to fly or where I should fly or take another mode of transport, because it's not about that. It's about something much more fundamental. It's about how do we ensure that whatever technology we bring into the world, whatever we implement to substitute human process, is not just efficient and cost effective, but that it's also secure and resilient to anybody who wants to tamper or try and mess about with it.
But we already have a lot of regulations around critical infrastructure, or what is defined as critical infrastructure. Now, this is going to be expanded in the Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill because they're expanding the definition. But Collins Aerospace, who are a big defence company and provide critical services to the airlines, would most definitely have been classified as critical infrastructure, and yet they were inadequately prepared. So what does this say about our preparedness, about the state of cyber defences at this moment in time?
Well, I think the rush to suggest that they were ill prepared is an easy one. But I would caution against haste, because you can't guard against every eventuality. No matter how high you build the walls, no matter how good your defense is, there are always vulnerabilities. And vulnerabilities more often than not actually in the technology, but in people. There isn't enough information at the moment about what's gone on with Collins either for us to be able to come to any definitive view. We can speculate, but I'm not sure that speculation is particularly helpful. What I'd suggest instead is that we look at what's happened in other incidents so far this year. There's a bit more information about what happened with Marks and Spencers, for example, at this point than we've got with Collins. And you might say the same thing in the sense that, well, they're a major supplier, food distributor in the UK and in Europe. They also should have had good defences. What went wrong? Well, we know what went wrong. It wasn't actually M&S. It was a business process outsourcing company that was targeted, and in particular, individuals working within that company. They were then impersonated, and it became very easy to pick the lock to the gates into the M&S fortress because of that. And this is really where the problem lies. It's supply chain security more often than not, and it's the people within those supply chains in particular. And whilst we may have very good law and regulation here in this jurisdiction, a lot of the BPO outsourcing that goes on takes place in jurisdictions in countries where the costs are lower, where security is softer, where there isn't the same rigor, where there isn't the same emphasis on the importance of security and resilience that we currently have in the UK and in Europe and growing in the West.
Well,
So
Ed, can I just come in there though? Because this just illustrates, doesn't it, the incredible complexity of supply chains. It also illustrates the incredible complexity of the world we live in. We had President Trump at the United Nations talking about risks. I mean, it strikes me that if you're in a world of such incredible complexity and you're going to add AI on top of that to make it even more complex, that really to have people who are actively going out there to mess the system up, to actually try and wreak havoc in the system, you should actually have some significant sanctions upon them because of the ramifications of what it is that they're doing. You know, you could see people, and let's face it too, quite often they don't know what they're doing when they're launching one of these things. With the NotPetya attack, for example, that was aimed at a part of the electricity infrastructure and nearly took out the Maersk shipping line. To be perfectly honest, you're in a situation where there's this incredibly complex machine and you've got these lunatics with hammers breaking bits of it, not knowing what on earth they're doing. We've got to deter this.
But this you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the problem there, Pete. So when you look at it, comes back to my point about the development of technology, and you've picked on AI, and it's a good topic just to sort of shuffle into for a moment, because we've seen coming out of the US this very much sort of this messaging very strongly against regulating and stifling innovation and the development of technology. It's all about the speed of development. It's about the R&D race and the commercial advantage that actually brings for the US. In Europe, by contrast, we've seen a much more cautious approach, a desire to focus on the consequences of this technology, the potential unintended consequences, and then the security of it as a result. So you have this competing tension, and we are still seeing technology come to market, which doesn't have the levels of security which really it ought to, and we end up then with situations like we've seen recently where security isn't totally infallible. In fact, it is fallible. So that's the one point. It's this sort of R&D, sort of this race to be able to win the battle in terms of who has sort of dominance over commercial markets in terms of technology. Then on the other side, we have increasingly reducing barriers to entry for those who may be tempted to enter into criminal enterprise. It's quite interesting if you think about Operation Kronos, which was the NCA operation, or the sort of the collaborative operation that was undertaken against Lockbit, but Operation Kronos here in the UK and with the NCA component, they identified no less than 800 affiliates who were effectively engaged in as a service activity using Lockbit ransomware. And that's the problem that we really have. Once upon a time, engaging in cyber criminality was the preserve of a limited number of people in, let's say, hostile geographies with low or non-existent regulation, and with either law enforcement turning a blind eye or actively the state being involved. We can speculate, we can talk about Russia, we can talk about all of that, but I don't think that really is on point. What's transitioned and where we are now is the fact that people here in this country are able to engage in similar criminal activity because they have access now to the tools and the resources almost as a turnkey opportunity. And yet, at the same time, the relative anonymity that they enjoy if they engage in that activity, sort of the relative risk that they face, anonymity high and risk low, which means that many more are inclined to have a go. It could be a one-time payday that sets you up for the rest of your life. And we've seen with the arrests, which are now making it into the news. I mean, most recently in the context of what's happened with Collins over the weekend, there's a guy here in the UK, not far from Heathrow, who's been arrested in connection with the particular impairment at Heathrow. We don't know where in that cybercrime ecosystem he sits. No details about that are currently available. But I think for a lot of people, it's quite startling when you hear initially the Lib Dems coming out and saying, it's Russia, it's Putin, when suddenly we have an arrest of a UK national just outside of Heathrow. That's the
I,
contrast that we're seeing. And the reality is there are many more people now engaged in this because it's just easy to do.
you paint a very worrying picture, and I think this is something that we need to revisit because it's a topic and it's a subject that's going to roll and roll, and there will be further revelations in terms of some of the recent attacks, and there will be further attacks to come, and therefore this isn't going to go away, and we hope you'll come back again soon and discuss this with us further. In the meantime, we just wanted, and you touched on AI, we just wanted to move on to what is I don't know, it's a light-hearted story or something to end on. But Pete, I know that we've heard from our friend Mark Zuckerberg that there are further developments in terms of the Meta AI glasses that we have that could potentially introduce some worrying concerns about the information it's gathering. It's our lives, it's our experiences that we're capturing here, but whose data is it?
Well, obviously it's Meta's. I mean, this friendly bloke that you invite into your home. He's the face of Facebook that's now meted into Meta, isn't he? I mean, look, I'm not being funny, but Mark's not exactly he's not exactly your mate, is he? I mean, this is the guy who at one stage was very, very, he was going to be great. He was going to look after your kids. He was going to have all of these people checking through to make sure that there weren't any predators out there because of his access into your home. And now he's come up with these glasses. Yeah, I mean, you know, these they're wonderful, aren't they? I mean, if you go onto the internet, you'll find there are so many experts who are talking about this as this terrible surveillance device because he knows what you're looking at. And if you think about that, yeah, there are some people who look at things that they shouldn't really be looking at. And all of that information is there. This is a man who he will be able to know who you're lecturing at. Think about it.
Well, it's not just your life it's capturing, it's everyone around you. It's your friends and family who you're interacting with when you're wearing these glasses. I think there are some major concerns here. And when you overlay some of the AI and the way it's capturing information, storing it, and then using it in ways that you possibly couldn't predict, I think there's some major concerns here.
Well, just think about this, Bill. You know, you're a major privacy expert. You work with Max Schrems on actually some work against Facebook, which resulted in a significant. I mean, they know your name, I was interviewing Mark Weinstein yesterday, who's a top privacy expert who's just brought out a book, and he was making the point that Facebook. And he says this is well documented in his book, but lots of other people have pointed it out. Facebook actually knows who the people who aren't on Facebook are. It has these shadow accounts for people because it can work out the holes that there are. Now, if you've got these glasses on, they're augmenting the gaps in their knowledge about other people. I genuinely think that, funny as it is, and I mean, how... just think about this. How comfortable would you be if you were in a pub and somebody walked in wearing those glasses? I mean, this is like, you couldn't even come up with this in a 1960s sort of thing like The Prisoner or The Saint. I mean, it's just weird. But I don't know.
My concern here is not just what it's capturing, it's the protections. I mean, it's whether you trust Facebook, and I'm one who doesn't, and whether their protections are any redress. And whilst I helped support Max and others in the European stage, I actually was part of a team that tried to bring a case here in the UK against Facebook. And unfortunately, the legal frameworks around representative action and other things here in the UK are inadequate. it's actually impossible or practically impossible to bring a claim or to bring a case against these tech giants or anyone who leaks or abuses your data. And I think we need more protections, and we need people reacting to this sort of thing with far greater concern rather than casually throwing on a pair of glasses without thinking of the implications. Anyway,
that's the point, isn't it? They don't think about the implications. I mean, you know, we've got to Tim Berners-Lee. He's got a project at the moment where he wants to get you to get your data back. He doesn't want it centrally. He's trying to push this idea. There's our friend Professor Irene Ng. She's been pushing this as a concept as well. I think that's the way you get it back. You actually say the only way that you get some understanding of what is being done with your data is if you are running it yourself, if you own it yourself, if you have control over it, if you say my data can be used for this or that. Then that's when you start to understand it, because you will also get a bit of revenue from there. And so you'll get an interest in actually sort of saying what it is that can be done with your data. And yeah, there's several other factors in all of this too, which is really you do own your data. It is about you, and we need to begin to understand data. And what it actually represents in this world. Until we start to do that, Bill, yeah, we've got a bit of a problem. I mean, the blithe way that people tick out the terms and conditions is just it's ridiculous and foolish. We interviewed the head of AI and ethics at Cambridge University, and he was saying, "Come on, think about it. Why are they putting all of this money into AI? They're putting all of this money into AI because they want to get right into your head, because they want to understand your demands, what it is that you want." Yeah, and so this is yet a further extension of that process. And as the professor at Cambridge was saying, the only reason they want to do that is because they want to make money out of it. It's why people want to actually put that money into this AI research. I mean, why don't we go back to our guest? I
think the message here, both in terms of our main story around cybersecurity and around this meta story, is considering the implications of wearing these glasses and the implications of whether you have adequate cybersecurity, whether you have cyber insurance. Edward, I don't know what your thoughts are on the implications of either, or whether you'd ever wear a pair of meta glasses.
Well, there's a few things that were going through my head there as you were talking. I mean, the first and most obvious, certainly in the context of AI, is that if you have a tech product that's given to you for free, typically you are the product, not what's actually been given to you. So, and that was true with the first edition of Facebook. I mean, really, this is about what are the use cases, what are the consequences of use that we haven't yet identified. Everybody thought Facebook, when it first came out, was a great way of being able to reconnect with people you'd lost contact with. It was the better version of Friends Reunited. Nobody was talking about data manipulation or mass processing, farming of data to be able to control behaviors. But now we know actually what goes on. We've got the same scenario here with these glasses. And I think all I would say about it, because again, I don't want to speculate, but just sort of trying to keep it relatively lighthearted. If your glasses are smarter than your trust model, then generally speaking, I think you're in trouble. And that's what we're facing here.
Well, wise words indeed. And Edward, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for all of your contribution. We'd love to welcome you back in future, because these stories aren't going to go away. They're going to run and run. Pete, thank you. Edward, thank you. Everyone, please have a look at some of our other stories here, because there's quite a lot that we're being covered in many of our different interviews, and we welcome you all back soon.
And also remember, we'll be able to add to this cyber insurance debate quite significantly.
Yeah, we've got reports coming up, so keep your eyes open for more.